The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe.
And it had this spiral thing that went over around the building. I was always intrigued of that. Instead of like the thought of Mount Olympus, what it's unattainable, right? So the staircase was important. We bring the fire down from it, but the logistics of other things we were doing just wasn't going to work. So I thought this spiral staircase would be cool. And so we presented that as an image and stuff. And then from there, it sort of kind of clicked, of where we were going to go.
How much of that do you actually like draw and plan, and how much of it actually happens as you're working with the materials?
Usually there's a sketch that, we bounce back and forth with the design team. And then once the feel is there, then usually for me, a Saturday or Sunday, I come in, have the shop to myself, and just start bending pieces until it feels right. And
cool.
These are some different variations of things that we started with, not knowing, then I'll make a three-dimensional model. But this is before it ever becomes something else. I mean, we don't know where it's going to end up.
This podcast is sponsored by FJM, Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Thanks for listening to the Marching Roundtable podcast. It's all about Carolina Crown today, and specifically this amazing set piece that they have for this year's production of Promethean. With us today is Jeff Sacktig, who is the visual director and drill designer. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for stopping and being here with us today. And also with us, Jeff Lewis and Jeff Hurr, who are the gurus of making beautiful props and set pieces for our activity. Jeff Hurr, how are you?
I am great. Thanks for asking us to come on.
Oh gosh, really happy. And Chris Lewis, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And I hope that you are watching the video version of this, because you can see Jeff in his very cool Guard Father t-shirt, which I love. It's so cool. The Guard Father.
That's cool. How it all started. That's how it all started for me. I had
really?
A couple of years in marching band that were in Guard, and then it was 8 years of volunteer work, which kind of taught me the ropes, and then it was just off to the races. And I guess it was George Hopkins that came to me in 2006, and we did props for cadets, and then it just kept growing and growing, and now it's out of control.
So you guys are just 100 miles an hour, it seems like, every day of the year, out in the hot heat, building and welding and doing the whole thing. What an impact you guys have had on our activity. I mean, it's just amazing, the artistry and sort of the scale of things that are possible that you guys sort of brought to us. I just really appreciate it. It's very cool.
Well, I will say something about scale. It seems like more and more these days, what's happening is everybody wants to shoot the moon, and they want a big production. And I'm good with large props, because I think it reads better on a football field than it does if it were 10, 11 feet tall. So I'm good with big, but the challenge for us is that we get requests to do stuff that seems a bit unsafe, including this year's design. The initial design, which Chris worked on, and he worked it and worked it and worked it until we just realized it was beyond the realm of safety for the kids. So we backed up, and Chris then came up with an alternative, and then Jeff and Reed and the rest of the crowd got together and put together a show design based on that. And it's much safer, easier to erect, and easier for the kids to get up and down on. And so we feel good about this year's production for sure. But it's scary where we're going, because everybody wants to go big.
Well, yeah, and not only is it have to be safe, but you have to be able to schlep it around and take it apart and move it from place to place. Like, that's the part that I think is the most amazing to me, is that you have to build these so they can be moved around and put together, right?
Yeah, it's most of my time once we've got a vision is me sitting here, how are we packing this in the truck? And then even beyond that, we don't want the kids to spend all summer building, taking apart, doing it 4 times a day, 5, 6 times a day. It makes their summer not fun. Sometimes though you just can't avoid having to put pieces together. For Mount Olympus, those stairs, the risers that lead up to the tower, that's 22.5 feet in diameter. And at one point, we were telling them they were going to erect it on the field during, their 2-3 minute setup time. And then we thought through it some more and was like, wait, I think we can come up with a way that this rolls out on the field. And then it was, there's only 3 of us in the shop every day. Can we do this? Can we move this as 3 of us? If we can move it as 3 of us, then surely 20 kids can, get on it and do it in a much safer way than 3 of us. But it is a lot of, mental gymnastics and Tetris of how does it all fit together.
Well, yeah. So Jeff Sacktig, like the idea of presenting Mount Olympus, like that is so ambitious. I mean, we know Crown's always ambitious. And by the way, Jeff, this show is beautiful. Like it's just another stellar, gorgeous production from Crown. It feels very Crown to me. This year's show does. I really like that. So why don't you tell us, Jeff Sacktig, where did this idea of having this, having Mount Olympus be on the field? I guess that was sort of inherent into the idea of the show.
Sure, it sure was. So like when we came upon this Promethean idea, of course we wanted to have a Mount Olympus. And it's a daunting task, right? You say Mount Olympus, what is that? Right. So what's great about our relationship with Jeff and Chris is that they're part of our team in terms of how we talk about how we're going to execute these things. I will say they're great to work with in terms of like they understand how we need to function, how we have to get it down a road, and what it takes for us to do what we want to do. Now, we shoot for the skies in terms of what we can do. And so it's one of those things where we kind of say, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z. Is this possible? And then, they kind of like sketch out some thoughts. And, it's a constant growing. Like it wasn't like, hey, this is what we want. OK, we did it. It was done. It was a process. We went through different versions of what it was. It was one thing. We knew there was going to be a staircase, right? So one of the initial plans was, there was this one single staircase, and it almost looked like a jetway from an airliner, And then we all said, well, can it move? It would be good if it could kind of pan. So we had this pedestal idea and then this staircase off that moved around. And then it was like, that's just going to be way too much. And it then looked like a jetway from there. And then we went through some other version. Chris did this pyramid thing, which was awesome, but seemed like it was massive to kind of get by, And then I saw this image of a diamond tower, it was called, somewhere, whatever. And it had this spiral thing that went over around the building. I was always intrigued of that, instead of like the thought of Mount Olympus, what it's unattainable, right? So the staircase was important. We bring the fire down from it, but the logistics of other things we were doing just wasn't going to work. So I thought this spiral staircase would be cool. And so we presented that as an image and stuff. And then from there, it sort of kind of clicked, of where we were going to go and what was possible. Also like the color guard started in that moment, so it had to kind of house them. And we referenced it throughout the show. It was a soloist on one point, a trumpet soloist. So I think we kind of like really kind of figured out what our needs were and how to support those. And then from there, it was a matter of just kind of fine tuning the design. We got something out of it. Then we kind of say, what about this? What about this? But I think the best part was the relationship of like, we're going to figure it out. You know what I mean? It was like, we're definitely going to give and take, and we're going to take everybody's thoughts in perspective, but we'll get there. And we couldn't be more happy with the product we got. They do awesome work, have been for years. I was around years ago with the cadets. So, I kind of know Jeff all along these years. And a lot of it is like, hey, this is what we want. Can you figure this out? And they do. So, we're really proud to have a relationship with them. Yes, Chris.
Yeah. A lot of that is Chris, I'll tell you that.
Well, it's pretty amazing. And the thing that's so great about it too is we know it's representative, right? Like it's artistic. So
Yes.
we're not expecting to see a mountain, but we're expecting to something that says, oh, that's what that is, and sort of makes my imagination go. It's artistic representation. But that's where I think Chris and Jeff, it's like, okay, it's one thing to build a spiral staircase, but another to make it so beautiful, and the artistry of the way the metal seems to bend and stuff like that. How is that part figured out? The artistic part, is that also, I'm assuming, a collaborative thing?
Yeah.
I mean, well, for me, I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm not as artistic as Jeff. You know, Jeff went to design school, and so he's more geared towards the artistic side. So for me, I got to start with the structure. And I was like, okay, we're going to have this tower, and it's going to be overall 24 feet tall. And then I got to, what space in the truck do I have to fit something that's 24 feet tall? And I got to break things down from there. And so that's why the top piece, it comes off. So the main tower is 15 feet tall, and the railings can pop off. And it's got to have a spiral staircase, so that comes in. And then I say, well, we need railings, we need all these things. Let Jeff go on the artistic stuff. Like, here's your basic structure, here's your height. It has to be this big. He and I will clash sometimes because he'll want to make it more, you know, the top of Mount Olympus. I had a very specific size because it needed to fit inside the base so that when it transported on the truck, it could fit inside the base and all one unit. And he wanted to make it bigger and more elaborate. And I was like, it has to fit. You got to shrink that down. So he had to kind of cut back a little bit on where he wanted to go with it. And then ultimately, we ship it off, and it is what it is. And then the kids play with it. And then the prop crew within Crown has to deal with moving it every day. And they figured out, you know what, it's going to be a lot easier if we put it on a trailer instead of putting it in the tractor trailer like we were expecting to. And so now it changed the way we could have framed some of it. And ultimately we had to make some adjustments to it. And it actually helped because we were able to make it more rigid, stronger, and do some things after the fact, after they had played with it at move-in. But yeah, it's got to start with that basic structure. And what is it ultimately? Like, if we take away all the artistic aspects of it, I got to get down to that basic structure and then let Jeff live within that realm. He knows it has to fit in the truck, and he knows that the railings have to be removable. That's what I give him.
And the design team was kind of, I think, underwhelmed by the basic shape that Chris had come up with. So having a little bit of character getting added to it made a lot of sense. So what I do is I just go on the internet and I looked up ideas, for Mount Olympus or Ascension or the unattainable or some of those kind of concepts, and look for visual ideas, and then I'll sketch something, and then the design team at Crown will react to that, and then we'll tweak it, go in that direction, and sometimes there's several iterations to get it to where it really needs to be. But it's usually inspired by some image, something that feels good to me, and then we just figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah. And we weren't concerned about that at all because we know Jeff is super talented at that. So when it's beautiful, if you look at the outer railings and then the spiral railing and the top pieces that kind of keep that all, it's a beautiful piece of art, and we couldn't have been more happy with it. And I think he knocked it out of the park,
So Jeff Hurr, what's it like to then figure out, like, I'm assuming you have to think, well, what can metal do? Or what can I bend in a certain way? Like, that's the part I don't know anything about that I think is so amazing. So like, how do you figure that out? I mean, from all these years what you can do, but can you describe that at all to me, how that works in your head?
Sure. When we first started building props, when Katie and Lily, my two, were in school, I ended up building most of it out of steel. And one of the band dads who was helping me was always complaining about, why are we building this out of steel? It's so heavy. Well, then it became apparent after 8 or 10 years of that it really needed to be aluminum. And that kind of redefined where we could go and how easy it was going to be for the kids to be able to to manage it and handle the weight. And I've worked, well, with wood from the 70s until the 90s, and then in steel for the 90s and most of the 20s. And then 2010 became aluminum. And it really, what I like about it is that it works faster than steel. Not quite as strong, but it saves on labor because you don't have to prime it. And as far as bending things and finding the shapes, it works about the same as steel. A lot of people will work their props out of PVC and wood, but either it's not strong enough for the kind of loads they're going to put on it, or it's too heavy. And these days, most people want to put massive amounts of weight on it. They want to put, like in this case, 40 kids up on those risers. So as a result, you have to, in this case, Chris would engineer it so that it can handle those kind of loads. And it seems like one of the shortcomings for what we do is the casters. You know, there are some casters that are heavier duty than the ones we commonly use, but the ones we commonly use, oftentimes we'll double up and we'll put twice as many casters on it so that it'll handle the number of kids that the design team wants to put in there.
Wait, so is that one of our little nuggets of takeaways here? Is double the casters rather than making them bigger? Like, I don't know anything about engineering, but is this sort of what you're telling me?
So, like we've done, if you look at, we didn't build this, but Boston, when they did Goliath, and they had those massive Plinko boards, you know, I think we had heard from them that there were 12 casters under each one, but those props had really thick plywood, 3/4 inch plywood. We don't use thick plywood. We do more framing and use a thinner plywood. And they were having an issue with the casters because they were popping. So we use no flat casters. So they have about a 275-pound load capacity. So adding more, it makes it more difficult to move because they all have to move. So it's a fine balance of how many casters do we add versus weight capacity. And we have the ability though to go to a 500-pound capacity caster, but it's twice the cost. So you gotta then it's posing that to the Corps or the band and saying like, we can get you more capacity, but it's a lot more expensive in that case.
Yeah, and the nice thing for you, Jeff Sacktig, is it was clear that you were not going to move Mount Olympus during the show, right? So,
yes, that's a stationary, a prop, and we work off of there. And it doesn't, in our minds, it didn't need to move. It wasn't about that one moving at all. So we were definitely set in what we were doing. So, but we had like a checklist of what we wanted to do. It's like an altar in the middle of the show, and then like the guard starts on it, like then the fire comes down to it. Then there's second layer of like you go to the top, and not many people go there, and the idea that's untainable. So there was definitely like checklists of ideas, and we just tried to narrow in on how do we make that happen. It was a great process. I mean, it was something that it was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of talking, and we spent many times on Zoom every couple of weeks to check in to see how we were with it. So, it was fun to do, and it looks great out there. It's still there's still a little bit of rawness to it because it's not totally finished in terms of what it's going to look like. There's some vinyl stuff that will be added onto that to kind of give it more of a feel. So there's more to come with that prop as we grow our season.
cool.
I don't know if I should be saying that or not, but I will.
Oh, okay. Look forward to that. I'm excited to hear that.
We'll let you say that, Jeff. We'll hold back.
Well, I mean, we know that you guys save some things to add life to the show and interest to the show as we go. I mean, it happens already just by the performers getting better and better, but that's really interesting. So I want to know, when did you start the conversation? Because I feel like most band directors don't realize how early they need to start talking. So I just wondered I mean, it may be different for everybody, but I wondered if you guys had an idea of like when was it?
I mean, we get contact. It's starting more and more that we get contacted earlier and earlier,
which is good for us.
Yeah, I mean, because we take September off. That's kind of our break, and then we roll into winter guard. But around October, we'll get a call from somebody, whether it's Reed or saying, hey, we want to use you guys in the, for the season, but we haven't fully developed the idea. It's like, okay, just let us know. Some groups, some corps have something to us by late November, like, here's an idea. Can you just kind of get a rough idea of cost? Or is this even possible?
Right.
I don't know. I don't remember exactly. We had our first design call in January.
Well, and I wanted to get that kind of ballpark, right? So this is like way ahead, Jeff.
I'm just checking my emails, and we started the conversation back in November. We started like, hey, we just want to make sure we're good to go. We got some thoughts, and we sent the document to those. And then from there, we kind of had a wish list of things we wanted to do. So it started pretty early for us. And I think even working through January, February, March, I think we were probably on the earlier side, than we were usually with this one.
Yeah, for us, I mean, it's hard with drum corps. Like we know how the process mostly works, but we try to give them a deadline. Like, can you at least get us something by February 1st? Because they all want it by the end of April. So, right. or some will wait until the middle of May. But it's like, if we're doing as many as we are, we don't have a lot of time. And the corps generally take longer to build. It's a longer build process. For Crown, we started working on it, and we didn't have everybody else lined up, so we spent more time just tweaking and doing things. And so it generally it was around 2 to 3 weeks that we take to build a corps out. This one kind of floated around. We were tweaking it for a month or so. We put it away for a while and work on other things and come back to it. But yeah, generally we want something by February 1st that's concrete, so I can quote it and we can start building on it.
Yeah, I think you were building somewhere in February, right? Didn't Reed come out at one of those camps and I think we had a Summit of Mountain figured out?
Yeah, we started on Olympus. Olympus was the first thing because we felt pretty confident about the other 8 props that they were going to be pretty straightforward. Olympus was the big hurdle. So, and I think one day we got off a phone call and we felt pretty confident that it's going to be this tower, it's going to be these 2. We were like, let's just go out and start it. So we just went out and we were like, we're going to just start on the tower and let that feed the rest of it. And so that's kind of how we progressed.
Well, see, that's what's interesting to me is like, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
We did spend probably twice as much time on Crown's props this year than we did on anybody else. It just required a lot of attention, and part of that is the artistic side. It's not something you can just pop out in production.
How much of that do you actually like draw and plan, and how much of it actually happens as you're working with the materials? Usually
there's a sketch that we bounce back and forth with the design team, and then once the feel is there, then usually for me a Saturday or Sunday I come in, have the shop to myself, and just start bending pieces until it feels right. And
cool. These are some different variations of things that we started with, not knowing, then I'll make a 3-dimensional model. But this is before it ever becomes something else. I mean, we don't know where it's going to end up.
Do you have the airport one? That was kind of funny, that one.
Yeah. Everybody, you need to be watching the video version of this because they're showing us drawings from the early stages. This is so interesting, guys.
Well, and you're lucky that we have this, because so this is when Jeff started working on the shadow mountains, and just kind of what that look was going to be.
And even with that one, we were detailed in the matter of like, we saw sketches, but we said, hey, make the heights random, so they had a sense of like life to it, and then we kind of said, which ones to kind of do that, and he kind of went ahead and made that happen. So, and then just looking at these showing sketches, that we would get, Reed and I would get messages with the sketches to say,
kind of where we ended up.
Very cool. Yeah.
We added more steps because I needed more for the guard, and then we actually made them higher than they were, just so it had a sense of impact. So there was small details that we went through, but it was a process. But it was great fun to work through it.
One of the things, Tim, that we try to do is, knowing that these are likely to get sold to a marching band and used possibly repeatedly by different bands, is we try to make it so that either the total prop stays within that 12-foot height limit for BOA, or some parts of it can be, reduced down to 12 feet. And also thinking in terms of what a band is going to be using to transport it, we try to accommodate that in deciding what size each component is going to be.
Oh, that's so smart, because they are going to have a life after this year. I mean, you built these fantastic things. Somebody should use it again and again.
Yeah, and it's something like this, especially the tower, like at 24 feet, no marching band can use it. And we kind of we explain that it's like this, you might end up being stuck with it. But then, one aspect of this is that it has to lay down and roll out on the field. We couldn't take this thing out 24 feet tall, so it has to lay down. 3 years ago, that would have been a really scary prospect to stand up this 24-foot tall behemoth. But we had done Troopers oil derrick, 2 years ago, and that was the first time we tried something like that. And we were scared for a while, because there was only the 3 of us in the shop that could try to do it, and we couldn't. But we have a tractor, so we could use the tractor to do it. But then we went and we saw and we explained to them, you're going to have to be smart about the way you do this and train. And we went to Night Beat and we saw them set it up in the parking lot, and it was like nothing. And we said, oh, okay, you get enough kids on this thing, they are smart, and they're smart about how they do it, and they're safe. They can do it safely. And so that made this idea easier to obtain. But part of that, with it rolling out, like I said originally, the top of it would store inside. So when we had it sitting, it was laying down out in the yard, and the top of it was sticking out the back. I said, some band could do a space shuttle show and have it separate and do, like a stage rocket. They could do anything with it laying down, because it's only 7.5 feet tall, and it's still this big piece. So hopefully there is a life for this, afterwards.
Yeah, I think the bottom part of that tower is removable, so it can be lowered, right? We talked about that. So Crown can look at kind of selling it. It's interesting because when Chris talks about being worried about lifting it up, it was never really a concern for me, because it's funny, because if you know this, doing drum corps and stuff, we rehearse on different fields, and sometimes there's scaffolding on other fields. Well, the field liners put the scaffolding down flat, and they always walk it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of been going on. So like when he told me that thing, I said, oh, we're gonna be able to do that. It's gonna be lighter. It's not gonna be steel. And it's a scaffolding of maybe 20 feet, right? But like I wasn't, when he had that concern, I said, that's not gonna be an issue. Every day on the second field, the kids put up the scaffolding, and it's amazing how fast they do it. Sometimes, it takes about, for scaffolding, on the football field, it probably takes about 6 guys, but we definitely use about 10 to 15 people to lift this, because it is a little higher, and it's not as squared, it's a round piece, so there is a bit of care. But the kids are like, it goes right up. They have no issue putting it up,
So Jeff, what are you saying, that we should have gone 30 feet tall?
No, I'm not saying that, but I wasn't so concerned as you guys were,
And
I sat on those scaffoldings. My cadet year, that's all we had was scaffolding sometimes. And nowadays, like, kids get to stadiums and stuff, but I was always on an aluminum scaffolding that was that tall. It's scary, with the outriggers and everything. But it's amazing how they kind of put those things up, they go right up. So it's fun to watch. You do get a little scary, but for me, it's like, no, it's not. It just looks scary. It's not bad at all.
Yeah, the actual steps ended up being a happy accident once we figured out a way to roll these out onto the field, you know, if you watch it, it looks like a giant rainbow coming out onto the field. And when we did it for the first time, it was like, this is a beautiful, like, other set piece that somebody could use. It was just so different, and we had to sink the casters so that it could get through the 12-foot height of Lucas Oil and other facilities, you know, but it turned into this beautiful other thing when it stood up just to move out onto the field. So now when I see it come out, that's the part of flow marching I'm wanting to see it be set up. Just interesting.
So what were you guys involved at all with the chains, those gigantic chains?
No.
That was not anything you were involved with.
No, we made
really
that
cool.
in-house. We did that in-house. Yeah, it was one of those things where I always knew that the character was going to get chained up. It's part of the story on the mountain, and
Sure.
you know, we were like, well, how are we going to do that? So it's those pool noodles, you know, basically. You know, and they got a little bit of structure. We put a little bit of metal in the insides of them, and then we wrap them with tin foil. So, as simple as that. Like, we were playing around, like, we couldn't find anything that big, so you kind of worked that out. So yeah, and they're super light. You know, it's easy to kind of manage. So it is a cool look when it kind of gets draped. You know, that was my always vision, that it would come up and cross, and the character would be right in the middle. And the trumpet soloist, who I have to get up there, he takes the one end up to a certain point, and then he comes around and he plays. That was always the big thing. Like, how am I getting the trumpet solo up there without being obvious? You know. But when the dancers kind of manipulate themselves, he becomes part of them, and then he just naturally takes the chain up, and it's a perfect way for him to kind of get up there and just pop out later, you know. So
yeah, it's very seamless.
It was a thought process. I know at one point I said, hey, maybe we can kind of make a ladder in the back, and he climbed up. But I was nervous about that because that's like 24 feet. I didn't think that was realistic, but I asked. You know, it was one of those things, like, maybe. You know, I thought there might be a clip him in and go up, you know, but, you know, like, we're thinking crazy, right? So, like, my vision is always a trumpet soloist on the top of this mountain during that beautiful ballad, and how we going to make that happen. So I was able to make him part of the color guard at the end of the section, so he kind of just became a character within that whole framework.
It's a fantastic solution. And when I watched it, it just made perfect sense to me. And then, and there's his horn, you know, like, I just thought it was really smart. I love that you guys are describing all the time it took to go back and forth, share ideas, get inspiration. I just want to make sure and highlight that part, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize how much of that it takes to create something this amazing and beautiful. Jeff Hurr, was there something else about this build that you want to mention that was sort of special or fun to do?
I think probably the artistic expression. You know, I feel most alive when it's just flowing, like it does building the railings or the shadow mountains, you know, and or just sitting and sketching. You know, that's my favorite part. But getting to work with the kind of talent that Crown's design staff has, you know, it's really sharp, really good.
Well, I love that you just described that sort of being in the flow and creating, and how much that means to you. And we can all feel that in your work. And I think it's very cool that you're sharing that with our activity. The fact that we have so many such high level artists and designers working for our activity is pretty cool. And thank you for being one of those.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
And of course, you have to have somebody like Chris around to figure out all the math and make it all realistic and happen and safe. And like so you guys are such a great team.
It really is a great team. You know, Katie, my daughter, his wife, runs the office. So she does all the billing and logistics and interacting with clients. You know, Chris does all the design work and engineering and pricing and brings a cut list out. And then Chris's brother, Sean, works with us. He'll do most of the cutting. And he and I then both do a lot of welding. And I do probably the lion's share of the artistic stuff, but Chris and Sean are getting much better at that as well. And then we've got a couple of people on the side that are also very talented and kind of grew up in the activity that come in and help as needed. But yeah, it's a small crew, but a lot of experience. And
part of what gets difficult sometimes is the number of groups we do, and having to, they want artistic. Katie had complained to me at one point. She said it seems like a lot of stuff has become more generic or more just repeatable, and so there is that fine line of, I got to make it to where we can build quickly, where it is repeatable. It's not every piece is a custom cut, because we can do that with the cores. We've got more time. When it comes to a marching band, we have to be a little more strategic about how artistic we get, and how repeatable can we make this, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time, because otherwise it becomes too expensive for them, too labor intensive for us. So there is that fine line. We've got portfolios here of stuff that Jeff did when Katie was in high school, and I said, there's no way we could build that now with as much time as I know he spent on it. We couldn't do it and not charge who knows how much. It would break the bank for groups. So finding that balance of, they get what they want, it's as artistic as they want it to be, but it can be, trying to make it as affordable as possible, because the activity's gotten expensive, and we just want to be a part of it and help out however we can. So.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting, sort of trying to figure out how to navigate those designers and band directors who, okay, well, we have to be able to make this logistically work on your budget, on your truck, for your kids, but like Jeff Sacktig, as you said, we start with the blue sky, right? You start with the big idea, and then you start to whittle it down and figure out what do we really need, what really works.
Yeah, we actually edited something out of the small. We actually had more of those small mountains, but we couldn't fit them on the truck. And even the first crack at the design, we realized that, hey, if we shaved off, I don't know, about a foot on each side, we can do X, Y, and Z with it. And then we came to the realization of what, we're going to be able to travel with. But yeah, I mean, that happened in many years. Like even last year, there was a couple other items on the list that we wanted to do, but it got edited out because, it needed to. We couldn't get down the road with it, and the show developed a certain way, So it's definitely one of those things where, and it is budget too. We definitely got the director Joe Roach in our ear about some things as well once we get to a certain point. But yeah, all conversations in November are all fair and good, and then we kind of whittled down to what we're going to do. But they're great at that process, and that's something that's special. So. Yeah. All you band directors out there, I mean, I don't want to put more work on you, but these guys are great at what they do.
Well, and if you want them to help you start early, call them today. Seriously, call them today for next year.
Next year, yeah.
Not for this year, everybody. Yeah. No, seriously though, that's part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we try, and for marching band, there were years where we were booked out, in the middle of March for marching band, and now we try and set April 1st as like, have your stuff to us by then so we can quote it, and we finish drum corps middle of May, and then we roll right into marching band, and we're knee deep in it right now, and we'll push, because everybody wants it by the end of August, so that's the big thing for us now. The nice thing about the Shadow Mountains, you can take those, it's got two sides, you can take those two sides off, and you have this nice stair step stage, and you can put a new facade on it, and you can have your band parents do that. You don't have to come to us to do that. Those can move and they can transform in so many different ways, that I think, that's what we try and think through, because some shows end up being so specific that it's hard to get beyond what you see on the field in the summer.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've got a local high school that had us make some props for them, probably 6 years ago. And each year for the last 5 years, they've reused those props in different configurations. And I thought, how smart is that you guys get creative enough to, kind of re-engineer your look but you've saved money. You know, there's 4 or 5 years in there that you didn't have to spend money on props. And we encourage that with any band or corps for that matter. Corps, it seems like they want really custom, really unique each time out. And that works for me, but it gets a little pricey.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they're the superstars. But the bands out there have to be a little bit smarter and a little more savvy. And I love that you just described that. You can take the same. I mean, you guys are giving them this sort of structure, the infrastructure that's really strong and works and will last. And the idea of reusing it in all kinds of creative ways, or selling it to somebody else to use in creative ways. I think that all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Jeff Sacktig, is there anything else about the show that you wanted to mention while we're here talking to these guys?
No, we're still working to make it great. We're still got some surprises, as you said, Tim, up our sleeves. So we're excited how it's going to unfold in the next couple of weeks. You know, the drum corps is great as always. A lot of talented members. It's awesome to be involved with it. You know what I mean? It keeps me young. I love being there. You know, it fills me with joy every time I'm around. So you know, we're happy the relationships we had with Jeff and Chris, and we look forward to kind of doing great things in the future.
Yeah, I love that you described it that way. The energy coming off the field and the passion of the performers and the love of what they're doing. And that's what we all love about drum corps. You know, it's so exciting to feel that. That's why everybody listening, you need to go to a show live and experience this live. It's much, much better than it is on video. Jeff Lewis,
Yeah.
what do you want to say as we're finishing up?
You know, for me, you know, I was excited to see all the shows as they were premiering on Flow Marching and looking and watching the shows. And then I had a friend of mine is the director at Coastal Carolina. So I had the opportunity to go down there and see the show live and see Boston and Crown. And, you know, we also did Spirit of Atlanta this year. And so they were coming out for the first time. And having watched Crown several times on Flow Marching and seeing it in person, everything makes so much more sense when you're looking at it and you can actually follow, you know, the character that you're supposed to follow, and you can just see the progression of everything. So yeah, going and seeing it live, you know, because Flow Marching is not always going to catch the thing that you need to be paying attention to. And so yeah, definitely go see it live, and just the impact you feel. If you have the chance to go to a rehearsal and just sit in front of the corps and feel it in your body, when they hit that first impact, I love it.
And Chris, how's it feel for you to see your work out there artistically making these shows so exciting?
Well, for me, it was always a dream. You know, in high school, I would watch, you know, I went to finals in 97 and 98 as a 10-year-old. And then to like following these corps through high school and knowing all the people, knowing Jeff writing drill, and then now I'm working with Jeff and having these, it's like mind blowing at times to think, oh, I would have never thought, you know, because I went to school for engineering. It wasn't to be a prop builder. It wasn't to weld. It wasn't to do any of that. But, you know, it all just turned into that. And you know, Jeff, when I met Katie, she told me that her dad was building props, and I said, "There's no way. There's no way that he's doing it for local high schools, right?" She said, "No, drum corps." I was like, "Well, I have to do this then. I have to be involved." So
it's pretty cool. You're rubbing a lot of really cool, famous elbows. That's very neat.
Yeah, I mean,
that's how I feel when I get to have these conversations. It's like I talked to Jeff Sacktig today. Like,
right, yeah, that's right. In high school, you would see who the drill writers were. You know, Michael Gaines, Jeff Sacktig. And it was like, oh, now I'm actually getting to work with those people. That's exciting.
Yeah, you're working with the rock stars, man. It's very cool. So Jeff Hurr, man, thank you for bringing your artistry to all this. I feel like that's the special part. Like the fact that it all works is awesome, but the fact that it's so beautiful and we can see the artistry, I think that's why your work is so special. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks, appreciate it. For me, the big deal is being able to work with the kind of talent that we get to work with. You know, the directors and design teams, both for bands and for indoor groups as well, but particularly for corps, because they want to go big and, have a dramatic show. And, like Chris was saying, we get to work with, really exceptional talent, like Crown's design team. And then knowing the kind of impact that we're having on the kids, because when Arcady and Lily ended up marching corps, they came back different kids. They were much more mature, knew how to commit to things that previous to that, they didn't have that feel to them. But so my wife and I both got on board with that immediately, and it's been really nice to be able to know that we're having a part in that kind of an effect on kids and the kind of adults that they're going to turn into.
Oh gosh, absolutely. That resilience and that grit and that stuck to it stuff, that you get, and that we all can point back to where we learned that and how much that helped us. I love that you are not only contributing to what those students are getting to do, but you're elevating what our activity is able to do. And I think what you guys are doing is really special.
Thank you.
I love it. Well, guys, this was fun. All right, everybody go see Crown live, see this amazing set piece out there, and now you know more about how it came to be. So Jeff and Chris, thank you guys for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.